Female politicians on the campaign trail face a different battle than their male counterparts, plain as simple. But what happens when that campaign becomes the race for president? Kamala Harris is now the vice presidential pick for Joe Biden. So let's talk about that with the best person I know, Dr. Wright. She is a professor at Princeton and the author of On Behalf of Our President and Star Power. Hello, Lauren.
Hi, Lisa. And you're my favorite person to talk to about this, too.
Well, that makes me happy. Okay, so let's not, I want to make sure we frame this conversation by saying, we're not going to take away from her accomplishments or her abilities or anything like that. But I want to talk in general, based on your studies, what you have found when it comes to females in politics at this level, at the presidential level. It's a different level than mayor races, local races, state races.
It really is. And that's such a perfect point, because most of the research we have on gender and politics in the US is done at the congressional level. You just have bigger numbers there, a lot of studies on state legislatures, but we've had so few women overall run for president or on the VP ticket that it's very hard to determine how much sexism is at play. But what we do know is that there's a healthy pessimism needed, I think, by the Biden campaign right now, because in 2016, gender was an issue for Hillary Clinton. Just a few months ago in the 2020 Democratic primary, a lot of people were saying, I can't believe 6 women ran and they were so well qualified and no one ended up being the nominee. So I think in a year when Joe Biden will likely only serve one term, he's all but indicated this, those presidency questions are immediately relevant to Kamala Harris. And so, yes, it's exciting. It's historic. It's great. Of course, she is well qualified, extremely well qualified, having served at various levels of government. But the Biden campaign needs to pay attention to these things that are in the electorate that people don't always answer honestly about in surveys.
Okay, so that's leading me into your op-ed, which was in The Hill, and it's a fantastic op-ed. If people haven't read it, definitely go and look at it. Because in your op-ed, you talk about the roles, the traps, and the expectations of women at that level, which men don't deal with, quite frankly. So how is Kamala Harris going to have to ride that line? Because she is also known as a very fierce debater and she's a prosecutor, so she can go after people if she needs to. But to the general electorate, that might not look great coming from a female, unfortunately.
Well, I think a lot of those effects are muted by party. So I think she'll still have support among Democrats. But there are still Democrats who are uncomfortable with a woman being president. With that said, if we look at the reasons Joe Biden probably chose Kamala Harris, and surely her talent and her political star power and her ability to think quickly on her feet and debate well is one of those reasons, those attributes, which are pluses, might not be credited as much as a positive for Kamala Harris. For example, women are often disproportionately punished when they show what seems to be aggression, or they're very strong in their opinions, or they attack an opponent somehow. It's just a different standard, unfortunately, for women at the executive level. And so some of those vice presidential pluses that she has might not have the same effect they would if it was a man. However, we have to wait and see. We don't know that for sure. Again, this is historic, and we haven't seen this kind of ticket before.
Right. I find it very interesting that in the year 2020 that we are still here, but yet it just slaps us in the face almost every time. So when presidential nominees pick their running mate, oftentimes standard political wisdom is the running mate kind of makes up the difference that the presidential candidate may lack, or that vice presidential nominee would deliver a state that the presidential candidate maybe couldn't. What is Kamala Harris doing for Joe Biden?
Well, one thing I think is her age, and she has a ton of government experience, but she's had a pretty fast political rise. I remember when I was working in California politics in 2010, I remember when she was running, and she's done so much with her career in the last 10 years. And so that upward trajectory and that energy is something surely Joe Biden was looking for, because his age is one of his key weaknesses. And the other one is, he tends to stumble a lot. There are a lot of gaffes. He doesn't always say what he means to say. And so I think he wanted probably someone who was a really nimble political competitor, who could respond quickly, and maybe is a little bit more polished than he is. And certainly Kamala Harris fills those gaps.
How do you think the general public, because I just want to kind of wrap this around, because you talked about the Democrat just base in general, and that they perhaps would be more open to a female vice president. But generally, when you're talking about a presidential campaign, you're talking about the whole country. So, and they're going to have to get some independent or swing Republican, they're going to have to appeal somewhere. So how does the female aspect of Kamala Harris either help or hurt that?
Well, I think we're getting better. I think people are becoming less sexist over time, since we measured this in 2008, and researchers estimated as much as 26% of Americans were uncomfortable with a female president. Now, during the primary, estimates were about 1 in 5 Democrats that were perhaps not comfortable with that. But I've seen all kinds of numbers, and the reason they vary so much is because of how you ask the question, and because people don't always tell the truth in surveys. And so, I think that we're getting better. I think there's progress now, and the more women we see running for office at the executive level, that becomes more normalized. But there's a couple narratives that I see right now being pushed that I think the political strategist in me, or at least the former one, gets a little bit nervous when I see so much confidence. And so it's absolutely possible that Kamala Harris will bring energy, excitement. Maybe she'll boost turnout or energize volunteers, but it's also possible that she might make it more difficult for Biden to win in a country that has such a history of holding women to unfair double standards.
So well said. And I just want to end on this because you wrote it in your op-ed and it literally slapped me in the face. It was so good. How can we be in a country where, we tell little girls they can be anything, but we can't point to one example of them either being at the number 1 or number 2 point of power in this country?
Yes. And so no matter how you slice it, this is really meaningful. It's meaningful for women, and it's meaningful for all Americans.
Lauren, always great to have your insight, your expertise in all of this. This is definitely your wheelhouse. And of course, we will be checking back in with you throughout the campaign, hopefully, as things progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.